Well, hello, ladies and gentlemen. You are listening and watching Rashkin Report. My name is Yuri Rashkin, and it's a treat to once in a while speak in English on this channel. So I'm delighted to be able to do so tonight. We're going to have, I think, a very interesting, intriguing conversation, possibility of several Hollywood movies that could come out of this. We shall see, and you can be a judge, dear viewer and listener. In the meantime, once again, welcome to Rashkin Report. My name is Yuri Rashkin, and I am joined tonight by Katerina Ksenieva, George Mariamudi, and Brock. Well, welcome everyone. I'm glad to see you here. And we're going to have where everybody here, I guess we can all clarify that everybody here is in the United States, which is an important clarification. George, are you right now?
Not everybody. I'm in
Are
Canada
you
only.
you left us already? Fine. We have
Yes,
George who's in Canada. All right. Unless you're in Georgia, but you're in Canada.
I'm in Canada. Yes.
You're in Canada. Okay. But more about Georgia later because that's a very important part of our
Okay.
conversation. Um, Katerina, let us begin this kind of building this puzzle one piece at a time, and I'm excited to welcome you. Uh, Welcome, and tell us about your story a little bit.
Well, guys, I'm glad to welcoming everybody amongst my friends who are obviously watching us right now, according to my invitation. And thank you, Yuri, and your Russian report that you are hosting right now my personal uh, live stream named C.A.R.M.A, Coalition to Abolish Russian Mafia Alliances. Uh, I'm, I'm thankful to my wonderful friends and life supporters, American scientist, political scientist Brock Hoteling, and my friend from Georgia, George Mariamuli, who resided right now in Canada. He's a supporter of fighter with the Russian mafia, the former president of Georgia, Mr. Saakashvili, who is dying right now in a prison of Georgia. You know, guys, the initial profession, the actress, the composer, the singer, the musician, the producer, is nothing but fluff because according to the world community, the smiling people on the red carpets probably are not involved very much in the political life. Personally, when I moved to the United States, I was smashed by the statement from my um, I would say, a friend from Hollywood who advised me not to speak about politics at all. My acting agent prohibited any possibility for me to be a civil rights activist, and she said either career or civil rights activism. And I was smashed. I was open jawed. Uh, Here I am in Los Angeles. Thanks God I fled Los Angeles. And I was thinking, am I here in the United States of America, the country of my dream? There
How
is
long? How long ago was this, Katerina?
what?
How long ago was this?
Well, it was from the beginning of my immigration. It was I moved in 2013 on my working visa as the singer and composer, and I plan to succeed in my music and acting business. But this circumstances smashed me, and I fled LA. I moved to New York, and I was thinking of myself, should I shut my mouth forever, like all my compatriots did in USSR and under pressure of the Russian mafia in 90s and 2000s? Or should I say, you know what, I don't give a damn things and I will speak out about the atrocities and uh, anti-humane Russian empire that causes lots of crimes and caused through all the history of the USSR and post-Russian reality. And I decided I'm going to speak out. And meanwhile, I was doing the production with one of the best musicians in New York, Chaim Cotton. We did the production that was Grammy nominated, You Gotta My God, Samal Hanakshi in Hebrew. And in 2014, my friend, my dearest friend, my colleague, the prominent actor from Moscow, Alexei Devochenko, was murdered by the FSB special forces. And of course, they arranged his death as the suicide like the actor, brilliant actor, killed himself by bouncing his head against the wall and bled to death on his own. Alexei Devoshenko, as well as my father, very famous movie satirist, Yuri Mamin, and my mom, his life supporter and producer and actress Ludmila, they were constant participants in anti-Putin protests in Moscow and St. Petersburg. Alexei Devoshenko was big supporter of the Ukrainian independence since the occupation of Crimea since 1914. He immediately was killed in Moscow. And after that, I called to my parents and I said to my father and to my mom, guys, you are the next. You have to escape. You have to do whatever you want, but please, as soon as it's possible, until they kill you, you have to go to me. And George even remembered this, our constant conversation with Canada, and with George Muramuri, we planned how we will help my parents to escape Russia. But thanks God, with the Guardian Angel support, they did it in 2019. When my father and my mom landed in the United States of America, immediately we received the call from the Voice of America's journalist. His name was Ilya Koval. And you know, when guys, you feel something sketchy in your destiny, you immediately, probably all of you, start to feel kind of nausea here in like the soul kind of spot. And I felt that nausea, and I immediately jumped in the social media and started to explore the credentials of Ilya Kolosov. Immediately, I found that he is Putin-linked agent, big supporter of Putin empire, and he largely promotes Hugo Chavez and Venezuela's activities of Russian officials. But I have to assure you that Venezuela is nothing but the possibility for the Russian officials to create the chain and the traffic of heroin and cocaine straightforwardly from Venezuela to St. Petersburg, Moscow, etc. So former mayor of my homeland, St. Petersburg, Valentina Matvienko, her son, Dmitry Matvienko, they are prolific in that kind of mobster activity with cocaine, heroin, and Venezuela is their hidden. And I said to my father, Dad, you're not gonna meet this guy. And if you will, let's invite him instead of cafe. And he insisted that he wants to meet my father in cafe. Let's invite him in Fairfield Public Library. Immediately, Ilya Kolosov denied opportunity to be inspected by the American cameras. And he said, I'm sorry, Yuri, we cannot arrange this meeting, but we know that you escaped Russia forever, and this is very unfortunate for Russia, that Russia lost that kind of prominent film director. Well, I have to say that my father is persona non grata in Russia. He is considered as the first swallow of Gorbachev perestroika. He hated by the Russian government and by the Russian mafia generally. And you know, when I hear the kind of stories that you guys, the Americans, the CIA agents, with the support of dark web, you will have all the information from the Russians who want to share with you this kind of, hidden information. I think this is another way to be fooled by the Russian agents, because on this dark web, they will, I don't know, like spread all type of BS that you will take as the genuine information, and you have to be very, very careful of how you deal with this information from Russia. Minneapolis is a very small potato, but I wanted to share with you a very important story that actually describes how the Russian mafia acts on a large scale. A couple of years ago, I bought this wonderful book, The Secret Story of Stalin's Crime. This book is important for me because my great grandfather was killed by the Bolsheviks mafia. He was executed in 1937. That was my grandfather. As I said, my father was harassed by the Russian mafia since probably 1991, since the end of Gorbachev perestroika, and they harassed him all his life uh, by the Russian mafia, who is ingrowing as the cancerous cells in the movie business of Russia. And we will speak about that in the later episodes. So the book is written by Alexander Orlov. He was the Soviet spy who escaped the USSR in 1940s. This book created the world scandal because Alexander Orlov described the leader of the USSR, Joseph Stalin, like pure imbecilic thug, bandit, low-life pig who enjoyed by torture, execution, sadistic harassment of his colleagues. And for example, his hobby was nothing but like uh, pacing along his office and spitting on the walls. Just imagine that kind of pig as the leader of the USSR. Stalin liked to spit on the walls. He used the targets and like spots or something, and he spit it all over the place. FSB and KGB, the former name of FSB and KGB, was smashed. They were pissed off and they promised to kill and execute Alexander Orlov. But luckily enough, Alexander Orlov survived, probably under umbrella of the CIA. But in like a couple of years ago, Oxford University and the Oxford University journalist, his name is Volodarsky, he released the article where he just smashed Alexander Orlov like fake person. Volodarsky stated that Alexander Orlov never was the spy, high-rank spy. He's just the clown and nobody but the fraud. Oxford Institute is the umbrella of the Blavatnik's family. I want to share with you the wonderful, charming guy who is the world philanthropist. He is he's one of the most powerful world leaders in political, economical, and cultural life. His name is Len Blavatnik. He is not only a philanthropist, he is invested in Yale University. He is invested in all type of universities and institutions of the United States and Great Britain. Old English babushka, this trophy hunter, English queen, whose eyes were shining when she was preparing to kill another poor creature. She was a prolific trophy hunter. She granted Len Blavatnik with the award of the Knights, so he's a knight right now. The guy is just charming. When you meet him, you'll probably like you'll enjoy to converse with him, and you will never think that this guy is the FSB agent, but he is because in the beginning of the 90s, the FSB allowed Blavatnik and Vexelberg to own the Russian aluminum factory itself. And this fact created the catastrophic situation in Siberia and Far East. First of all, the guys poisoned the nature around. I wanted to show right now the Russian rivers and Krasnoyarsk, where Rusal is based. And I want to assure that this situation is linked to the Kentucky's aluminum fabrics that Blavatnik, with the support of Lord Barker, wanted to create in the United States of America. I want you to understand what kind of ecological disaster will wait for the American slaves of that kind of powerful tycoon in the United States of America. So let me describe. It's the red rivers in the Far East. The rivers poisoned with aluminum dust is going to the world Nordic oceans. It's an ecological disaster that was created by Blavatnik and Vexenberg. These tycoons made their power on the cancerous diseases of the Russian slaves. Thousands of Russians were dying in the beginning and all over the 1990s. The Russian population was totally diminished. In the beginning of 2000s, all of us realized that there was no Russian people on the Far East. People are dying over there. So in I think 2000s, Blavatnik decided to create a similar factory in Kentucky, state of Kentucky, with the support of Lord Barker. And I want to ask you, what is the goal of the FSB side yard? What is the mission of that kind of scumbags to destroy the social environment, the ecology, the world society, to take our lives as just the dust? To that kind of people with nobody but just losers, working bodies, they can use us as the slaves. At the same moment, Blavatnik is very powerful FSB agent, because his goal all around 2000s was promote Putin movie projects, like for example T-34. You can find this movie right now all over Netflix. You can find this movie garbage, absolute garbage, propaganda, polished BS. You can find this movie as the participant of the world movie festivals. Blavatnik bought a Disney company. Blavatnik bought Warner Brothers Music. Blavatnik invests in Trump company. So as the result of his activity, we see the Trump as the president of the United States. And I want to assure you that at the moment when Trump was elected, all the Russian Dumas were celebrating their victory. And the Russian officials said, finally, we are the winners, because right now the whole world will laugh at the United States of America, because their president is nobody but clown and the idiot. So that's how maguls, tycoons, the powerful members of the Russian mafia are bribing right now the world society. So right now the Russian mafia is three components beast: is FSB, Russian government officials, and of course the Russian oligarchs. With the money of the Russian oligarchs, the former based, let's say, FSB organ of suppression, organ of intimidation and interrogation and eradication of civil society, right now have enormous power of bribing the world economical, cultural, and political elites.
Right.
So,
Okay. So I have a question. I actually have a question for. I was hoping that Brock. Yes, I have muted everybody because we had something going on with sound. But now I think basically, if you're not speaking, please mute yourself. That would really help with quality. But Brock, I was wondering, we have people here speaking with various degrees of accents, and except for you. And well, I mean, everybody's from someplace, but your English sounds pretty good to me. So I was wondering, how are you? What is your response and feelings when you're listening to this story? When basically, to summarize it, as I see it, is we have Kremlin, Russian, FSB, ill-gotten money finding its way to the West and being laundered one way or another, and criminality and corruption spreads. And if we're serious about fighting Putin, if we're serious about, I don't know, helping Ukraine for one, then we should be more proactive and aggressive about dealing with these kinds of influences. When you can walk around a big city in America and see like Blavatnik, I don't know, medical school or something. I mean, very serious kind of money we're talking about. How do you feel about that?
Oh boy, that is a great question, Yuri. Thank you so much. And I'm really honored and proud to be on with the luminaries here. And keep in mind that Katerina and I have had many dialogues that have taken place over a number of years about these issues. She's educated me a lot about, she has the stories. She has a cornucopia of wonderful stories. My background, of course, in college, academically, I was nuclear physics and political science. So I tried to look at the soft variables of the social sciences and compare that to what the hard sciences were doing, like physics and chemistry, and realize that social sciences are really a lot of BS, to be quite honest. The old models of Maslow diagrams and everything, it's like horoscopes, right? So what we've been doing in, I've trademarked the term human systemics. And what we've been doing is, and this is kind of leading up to where Katerina and I came from, and we'll give a little bit of context to what I would say in response. And I apologize, Yuri, for a little bit of a long response to your short question. Forgive me for a bit here, but it's important for context. Human systemics really is about taking system dynamics and game theory and applying that to complex systems of human behavior. And I've lived in 25 countries, 11 years in Africa, many years in Europe, and so forth. And I've never been to Russia. So Katerina was quite an eye-opener for me. And what I wanted to focus on with Katerina, of course, over the years were a couple things. Number one, what are the cultural imperatives that exist when people have certain behavior patterns? And those cultural imperatives, what are they really? What are the hidden ones and what are the exposed ones in places like Russia and the United States? And I can say Russia has their approach to propaganda and an approach to governance. The United States also has their approach to propaganda and their approach to governance. They are not so much dissimilar as some people believe, and I've had to convince Katerina of that. We have our oligarchs, and Russia has their oligarchs. We just have a little different system of dealing with them. We don't throw them out of windows traditionally. We do different things. We hide them in the media and disappear them in the media is how we do it here. But from our conversations, I learned a lot about what was hidden from American eyes. And I go back to the years of 1989 and 1991. And this is a discussion I'm going to open up to the rest of you about where Katerina and I have kind of like, I wouldn't say divergent point of views. We just have very, very different perspectives on what actually took place. And those come through filters. She came up through filters from Soviet Russia and the experience of embracing America, which she sees with the eyes of a de Tocqueville or what have you, which is wonderful. I come in from a perspective of knowing a lot about America and having a parallax view, if you will, from my experiences in Africa and in Belgium and Germany and in Czech Republic and what have you. And what we came together on was this issue. And take a look at the really critical turning points in 1989 and 1991 in Russia, when Gorbachev brought about perestroika. And I have to convince, and I will say this as an American, there are some very good things about this country of America, but our hands are not dirty in our relations with Russia and so forth. We all remember the Ribbentrop Agreement, and we blame Stalin for that with his despicable situation he created for the Russians in World War II, and I cry for those Russians who died in World War II, like I cry for the young Russian men today fighting in Ukraine because of the Muscovite nonsense that's been taking place there, as we all do. I think all civilized people would anyway. Americans' hands are not dirty, and I'd like to open that that issue here, because back in 1989, when we knew that Russians were teetering towards where the Germans had been after World War I, where it was very, very people didn't have food to eat and so forth. Russia was on hard times in 1989, and the Americans had the wherewithal to help out, and they totally refused Gorbachev's entreaties to help with kind of like a Marshall Plan, which we were very capable of doing, and many of our policymakers were capable of coming up with that, and some of them did. But typically the United States, we have a lot of United States foreign policy, keep in mind, is inhabited by academically highly qualified Harvard and Yale and Ivy League people who are academically extremely smart and in common sense and policy extremely stupid. And that is the source of a lot of bad American policy over the years, not only the Iraq War and the Vietnam War, which were all founded on very, very, ridiculous, kind of foundations of beliefs that were not true, simply not true. And in talking with Katerina, I wanted to broach the issue of, okay, we could have done that, but also keep in mind when Boris Yeltsin originally had 5% approval rating, worse than Stalin when he was originally elected. Americans supported Yeltsin at some point. They didn't at first, but then they did. And if you recall, the Bill Clinton team and the Pete Wilson team for the United States went there to help Yeltsin with his marketing, and they adopted an American marketing model and boosted his favorability rating to 55%, got him elected, helped get him elected, I would say. And later on, when we had the shock effects that took place that Yeltsin imposed at that point, a lot of it was based on the theories of our stellar cast of Nobel laureates that went to Russia also and worked with the Russian counterparts to create the macro and microeconomic background that actually laid the groundwork economically for what later became the Russian mafia, as Katerina would have it. And now the punchline to all that is, I will kind of expose the conversation I had with Katerina. The punchline is, okay, our theories are the American press said nothing about our culpability in some of what happened to Russia. And we did treat Russia very badly back then. We could have done much better for Gorbachev and Perestroika, and we didn't, and that got Yeltsin into power, and we had a large hand to play in it, as did the British and the French, what have you. And Katerina will say, well, it's because we Americans are naive. And that is our touch point, because she may be very right about that. It's possibly that our highfalutin Ivy League policymakers in Washington, D.C. are oblivious to the real politic of what actually happens in Russia. So I'm going to open up the conversation to the rest of you there and give the American perspective. And I can play through sides. The Americans did a lot for Lend-Lease in World War II with the Russians. I realize that. We've done great with the Marshall Plans. But where was our Marshall Plan, when the Russians were struggling, and we could have, helped Perestroika and really helped Russia move towards a European kind of, if you will, cultural imperative versus what we're seeing today. And I'm not sure what that imperative is. I'm going to leave it to Georgi and you, Yuri, and also Katerina to take it from there.
Brock, thank you. But I'm actually have a question for you based on what you said, this cultural imperative. Can you talk a little bit more about what you mean by that term? Because I'm not clear.
I'm happy you asked that, Yuri, because I've been accused of being a fire hose by many people. I talk too fast, and sometimes I condense scientific issues into something a little bit less than what people can digest at a time. A cultural imperative, both from a social science perspective and from a human systemics perspective, is that which a culture believes, that which a culture, like the Russian culture, if you will, or the American culture, that without which they would lose their spirit, lose their soul. So that's the imperative. That's different than a cultural norm. Like in here, the cultural norm would be, if you're a Russian, okay, you want to integrate with American society. On 4th of July, attend American barbecue. Make sure you eat a couple burgers and hot dogs, even though you hate hamburgers, and our beef here is not all that great, I know. But you can kind of like go along with the cultural norm. But the cultural imperative might be something more like, okay, let's kill off the NFL football league. Now, if American men didn't have NFL
You know,
football,
the
they
reason
would
I
really lose
think
their soul.
I think the reason you may have a problem with the burgers is because in Wisconsin we figured out that the secret is you add butter to them. You have butter burgers,
Oh, that's it.
and
And I've seen people
then
with the ice cube, Yuri, with the ice cube, and I saw that on a yacht. Help me out with that. And don't
right.
forget, our greatest English writer was Nabokov. And coming from Russia and writing incredible English like he does, I don't know how you Russians come. It's very courageous what Katerina and her family did to come here, because I don't think I could go to St. Petersburg and learn all my Russian with, I know the kakvi pashifaitsia and kakasavut and what have you, the basic stuff. But man, the Russian cases, that's a tough language. And English has its own difficulties.
So you feel that there's what is then cultural imperative for? So if it, to be an American, you eat some burgers, but what do you do to be the Russian?
Well, for the Americans, don't forget, we are the land of second chances. Okay, Americans love, what is it? They love stories of, they love comeback stories. They love giving people a second chance, redemption stories. The true American story is a redemption story. That is an American imperative. So you can, as you've seen, you can do anything. You can, and don't forget the Australians are very similar. Australia was settled by all the criminals from England. They sent them over there, and Australia becomes very successful having criminals. And we Americans, I call ourselves jokingly.
Clearly, those were the go-getters.
They were the go exactly. Well, we are the losers. We adopted all the losers from England and even from Russia and from France, and all these losers came over, and we became winners in a way. And there's a certain part of the American spirit and soul which is optimistic and believes in second chances. And that's what distinguishes us. I spent enough time in Europe to know that Europeans are very pessimistic.
That's not a good approach. You're saying that's not a prudent approach with Russians?
Well, I'm asking that question of this glitterati here. You're going to help me with the answer to that. That's the Katerina dialogues that we've had for years.
Well, let's figure that out. Katerina.
Okay, great.
Yeah, your experience, I think you have a personal experience with this whole setup, and could you share your story?
Well, first of all, it's the murder of my friend Alexei Divoshenko, as I told. The second is the constant harassment of my father's, life. Just think about that. Russian satirist, movie satirist, who constantly mocks it's just I cannot imagine that kind of story can happens to be in United States of America when some director, the Coen brothers, for example, could be asked by Steven Spielberg. But in Russia it happens. I will tell you this story in the next episode. But today I wanted to assure you guys that the Russian mafia destroyed millions, more than 60 millions of the lives. And
but that's far away in Russia. That's not here, right?
Yeah. No, how does it apply here?
No. This is not far away. This is, for example, somewhere in the Far East. Right now, the numbers of skulls and bones of the American citizens, African American citizens, English citizens, French citizens are lying and covering the Death Valley of the concentration camp of the former USSR amongst the Soviet citizens. Like, the atrocity has no limits. And my rage against the Russian government is my appealing to the Americans who actually created, who broke his right. The Americans helped to create that kind of monster.
We called it enablement. The real word is enablement. We enabled a lot of that. And Catherine, you said it's because we were naive and we were taken in. Our very smart Ivy League people were totally conned, if I could use that word, conned, by the Russians. That's what you tried to tell me, correct?
I tried to tell you that in the beginning of 90s, you guys imposed uneducated, trained in democracy Russian society, the trickle-down economy by Milton Friedman. This economy destroyed Russia because Yeltsin gave all the power in the claws of the Russian criminals, the racketeers, the thieves, who became eventually the Russian oligarchs. So the component of the Russian mafia, the first FSB, the second is government official, and the third component is the Russian criminals, the thieves and the racketeers, the murderers, the Prigozhin, who became the powerful Russian oligarchs and bribing the whole world society. And basically my rage is, I think it's just, I feel that we guys reached the point when all of us should press the red button and call the AED team for heart resuscitation until we just providing CPR, like support for almost dead body of the world democracy. We have to do that step by step with my imperfect English. I apologize with to the native English speaking audience, and I will apologize to the rest of my days. My brain has limits. The English language is not that simple, but my rage has no limits. Until you guys, until the Americans and Great Britain and all the world society and NATO will help us to destroy the Russian evil empire, to diminish the centralized Moscow power, to divide Russia on the regions, and maybe to help Russia to build the democratic civil society as well as America did, because the whole empire, the two empires are very large. It's large lands, United States of America and Russia. It's impossible to manage that kind of large land and at the same moment be centralized by some Moscow mafia. We have to divide Russia. Russia should be diminished. And the war in Ukraine is the apogee of the impudent and horrific murderous Russian power.
I want to correct one thing, if I might, Yuri. Katerina said one thing, and much of what she says has the ring of truth. But in the case of economics, it wasn't strictly Friedman's type of trickle-down economics at that time, even though W. Bush was in charge. The American team that went over there was really looking at macroeconomic stabilization and economic restructuring. And the problem was a transition from central planning to markets using shock therapy. That was the real problem. It wouldn't have mattered what they did. The idea is that you can transform a central planning economy bought into by the Soviet Union until Yeltsin took, remember the Yeltsin in Russia versus Gorbachev and Zanayev, I think, was it Zanayev? In trying to keep the pieces together, the Soviet Union. Yanayev. And of course, in the transition from central planning to markets with shock therapy that they imposed, any system thinkers would take 5 minutes to realize this was a complete folly without looking at existing cultural imperatives. I'm going to bring back the issue of cultural imperatives. Unfortunately, economists, Harvard economists and Yale economists and Princeton economists are not trained in anthropology. They're not trained in history. They're not trained in systemics. They know economics, and they brought economics, and shock therapy came there and destroyed the entire Russian economy, and the Americans have soiled hands in that whole environment and could have done much better by sending people that had respect for where the Russians were coming from and how to get them there without shock therapy. That was a massive mistake by the United States.
I will say that I will land in with my kind of like a plane here, and I will say that none of it matters because we could have, no matter what we do, I think Russia is just doomed. Just like when you have opportunity,
you're so pessimistic.
Get out when you have a chance. All of this, it doesn't work. But before we run out of time, I want to make sure to hear from George Mariamuli because that is, a testament for the country that did manage to get away. There was an opportunity and it got out. And so it's very important, Georgia. and there was a leader who still is, but now he's in prison and he's in the
Yep.
hospital, Mikhail Saakashvili. And I think it's really exciting that George can give us an update on Mr. Saakashvili, and just in general, well, first of all, also really a message of support. You're muted, George. You're muted.
Georgie?
Okay, there you go.
Okay, very good. Thank you very much for inviting me to this conversation. I'm very happy to know Mr. Saakashvili. Actually, I overlapped with him only once. I know Mr. Saakashvili's mother. Well, he's the author of Unprecedented Economic and Political Reforms in Georgia, and he was very successful in transforming of one of the states of the former Soviet Union, actually the most criminal and corrupted states, into the prosperous and very progressive country. And today, unfortunately, he's in prison. He's suffering from depression and he's in the demented state. And we believe that he's enemy of Putin. It is the Putin who ordered to throw him into the prison. And our understanding is that Putin and Kremlin, they can't forgive him his successful reforms. His success, it was a very bad, in the brackets, example to other, former Soviet Unions, Union states, the reforms which turned out very successful on the territory of the Soviet Union. So he fought against mafia, he fought against crime, against corruption. He declared zero tolerance to crime and to corruption. And he implemented transparency, division of powers, and implemented Western economic standards in Georgia. And within a couple of years, this republic turned out in a very successful republic. And they can't forgive him this success and his achievements. Unfortunately, he's in prison today on the charged with the fake and the fraud allegations. He lost, he was about 120 kilograms. He lost about 60 kilograms, and he's in a very bad state. And I wish him all the very best and the best of luck. It's a very sad story. It's very unfortunate that Georgian reforms, finished, and they had this result and very, very sad consequences. Unfortunately, this is what I wanted to say about Saakashvili and what is going on in Georgia. This is the update.
George, that is really wonderful, and thank you for sharing and giving us an update. And I hope that Mr. Saakashvili is freed. I hope he gets the care that he needs, and that Georgia, continues to resist. It's difficult to resist Russian advances, but I guess that's why so much depends on Ukraine. Because if Ukraine is able to be victorious, and when Ukraine is victorious, then that's also going to help all the countries such as Georgia to resist the Russian influence, which is so corruptive right now. And I guess maybe we should stop at this point for now, but I really want to thank my wonderful guests, Katerina Ksenieva, Georgia Maria Muli, and Brock, who joined us. But Brock, you have some interesting credentials that I look forward to learning more about. So maybe you're like The Rock. That is just one word, Brock. All right. Well,
thank you.
Absolutely, and
thank you, Georgie.
You're very welcome.
Yeah, and we'll see how all of this develops. And I want to thank everyone who joined us for this stream. Look forward to seeing you next time. My name is Yuri Rashkin. Take care, everybody, and till next time. Bye-bye.